Hey, internet pals, who wants to talk about books with me? I mean, I guess if you don't, you wouldn't have clicked on this video, but we're talking about books. Specifically, I want to talk about just the genre of romantasy in general, because I've been having some interesting conversations with my cousin and then seeing conversations about it online. And I just kind of want to yap about it here and see if we can get some more opinions, a little more conversation going, because something that my cousin and I have kind of noticed stems back to the before times when we were young little baby millennials, still going through middle school and high school, back in the early 2000s, 20 teens. I'm sure there's a better way to say that, but I do not know that way right now. So that also doesn't matter because that's what we're yapping about. And the phenomena back then was so much young adult literature coming out that was kind of romantic. There was a romantic element. There were usually vampires, sometimes werewolves, witches, all those things. So, like, these kind of fantasy, paranormal, romancy young adult novels were kind of all the rage back then. There were so many getting getting written. I promise, I'm literate. I can speak. The evidence is out, but I got things to say, and sometimes my mouth doesn't keep up with my brain. So we're gonna keep talking about this. And that was the thing that we noticed. We read a lot of books that we loved and a lot of books that were kind of trash, but they were getting pumped out at that time because that's what was popular, that's what was selling. And something that we've noticed now is that there's a lot of romantasy now. It's hot in booktube, book talk, book threads, bookstagram. Romantasy is the it genre. And something that we have been wondering is this romantasy thing negatively impacting the quality of some of the books being pumped out or put out there? I should probably try to use less charged language, but you know what? This is my video. I'll speak how I want. And something that I've noticed is that I do think that in some cases it is definitely negatively impacting the quality of some of the books that are being put out there. I recently spoke about the Valendor duology, which is made up of The Last One and Cruel Dawn by Rachel Housel Hall. I believe I should have looked it up before I started this video. I'm pretty sure I'm correct, but I will insert images here. Because here's the thing with that duology. I read both of them. The first book, I didn't think it was that great. I thought the pieces of greatness were there. It just, I don't think it needed to be a romantasy, if I'm honest. I think it could have just been a fantasy novel and it would have been fantastic. I don't think the romantic element needed to be there. And in the second book of that duology, the romantic element was not really there that much. And I think it really improved the quality. Now, overall, I think both books needed more editing and things, and I get that that author, her primary genre is not fantasy or romantasy. I believe it's thrillers. And while I think that authors should explore other genres, 100%, I support that. And any artist, if they want to kind of step out of their comfort zone, I think they should. In general, I think people should do that. I mean, I'd step out of my comfort zone making these videos, and you wouldn't know that my primary focus is I'm a little nerdy, sciencey horse girl. Those are the places where I'm comfortable. But here I am yapping about books as if I'm an authority on it, which I'm not. I'm just a gal on the internet. But my point here is that I think that that duology specifically, and this is just my opinion, was probably put out as a romantasy because romantasy is really hot and it's selling right now. And yeah, I've read romantasies or books that are technically romantasy that I've loved. The Plated Prisoner series is a series I love. I haven't read the last one, Goldfinch, yet because I don't want it to be over. And I know some people absolutely hate that series. That's okay. Books are art, art is subjective. Some people probably absolutely loved the Valendor duology. That's cool. Good for you. I think it could have been improved. And the thing is, with some of these books that I've read, well, I guess that's a broad statement because I've read a lot of good books lately. I've gotten very lucky picking up random books and enjoying them. But something that I have noticed, because I know my cousin specifically has mentioned that she would like to dip her toe into romantasy. And I know she's read like Fourth Wing because I made her, because dragons. We love dragons here. I'm trying to get her to read a couple of other books, but it's the romance element that I think is kind of the hang up. And a lot of the romantasies I've read, while the romance is important, some of them I don't know that the story would be negatively or massively impacted without like the romance heavy scenes, if that makes sense. Now, like the Played Prisoner, for example, the relationships are important. If the spicy scenes weren't there, wouldn't impact the plot. And that's how I feel about a lot of the romantasy that I've read. That I haven't read a lot of like traditional romance, so I may be wrong here. Take what I'm about to say with a grain of salt, but I think that one of the big distinctions between romantasy is that the fantasy plot could be totally fine without the romantic elements, whereas romance needs that uh, plot with the romance, because that's the whole point of romance. Like the plot is supposed to focus around that relationship, whereas romantasy, not necessarily. Which then brings us to the question of, does romantasy belong in the kind of romance umbrella then? I don't know. I don't know enough about these genre umbrellas. I'm just here yapping at you. But in general, I don't think that romance existing in a book necessarily means it's like a romance or a romantasy book. And my cousin also had brought up this question of, are these books being labeled romantasy maybe because they are written by women authors? And maybe, because yeah, when it comes to romance and things like that, if there's romance in a book, I have noticed it's more likely to be labeled romantasy, whereas a book with no romance in it, or if it's just written by a man, even if it happens to have a like romantic element but it's not the main point, will just be labeled fantasy. Now, I am a fantasy reader. I love me some fantasy. So books that I've been picking up end up being considered romantasy because they do have relationships and things, and I enjoy the spicy parts of books. I don't necessarily like when that's the whole point of the book. Uh, the Nightfall trilogy, for example, I don't think the whole point is the romance spicy elements, but that is one thing that makes it not one of my favorite trilogies or series that I've read so far in the last year or so. I'm enjoying the ride, but I do think that at least in the first book, the spicy scenes were a little too highly emphasized for me personally. I still have to read the third book. It's sitting on my physical TBR pile right now, but that's just an example there. And then if we look at the Valendor duology again, I know I'm mentioning it a lot, but it is one of the books that I've read that I have the most examples for, because most of the books I've read lately I have really enjoyed, and this is one of the ones that didn't quite make the cut of really enjoyed for specific reasons. And one of them is that the romance felt forced. And if you're going to write a romantasy, at least in my very non professional opinion, I do think that the romance should feel natural. It shouldn't feel forced. If romance is a big part of your book, then that shouldn't be something that I'm cringing at as I'm reading flirtation through dick jokes. And that is a big part of what the flirtation was, at least in the last one. And that was one of my big problems with it, because I love me a good dick joke, but if that's your entire way of flirting with me, please swipe left, yo. But yeah, I'm so sorry. I just said yo unironically. I will go sit in timeout after I'm done yapping. I pinky promise. But that's just one of those things where I think that duology would have been a lot better as just a fantasy without the romantic elements, quite personally. And I do suspect that for some of the romantasies that are being released or have been released recently, if they were just fantasies, they would be more enjoyable. And part of that also comes from when you're writing something with the intention of it being a romantasy, there needs to be that romantic element because that is the implication of saying and marketing something as a romantasy. Whereas I think that fantasy is fine. Like, you don't need the romance to make a great book. But just because there's a little bit of romance in a book doesn't necessarily mean it is a romantasy. You get what I'm trying to say? Am I making any sense here at all? I guess one example of what I fully believe is a true romantasy is Never the Roses. And that is a book I really enjoyed. I felt the attraction in the relationship and the slow burn and the witty flirtation and the notes back and forth and the final coming together, so to speak, of Onira and what the hell is his name? Why do Steranos? I think. If I'm wrong, I will put his actual name here on the screen. But that it felt so earned. Like, I really believe their relationship, and just I think that that is a fantastic romantasy where it's a fantasy book where the romance here is important, and that book could not exist without the relationship between our main characters. Whereas other romantasy books I've read, if you remove the romance, I the plot of the book would probably be fine. You may have to tweak a few elements, but it could be a pretty well-rounded fantasy book. And I think that that's one thing that we need to consider when actually labeling something as romantasy. Does it need to be romantasy? Does that romance need to be there? But this could just be me speculating about stuff that I don't need to be speculating about because maybe the answers are out there and I should use this laptop to Google them instead of just sitting it here as a prop in a video. I was actually using it in a video I just filmed not too long ago, so I pinky promise there is a point to my laptop being out, but you'll have to check my other channels for that. So, this is just kind of my thoughts there. I think that what my cousin and I were talking about is kind of happening again. There were a lot of um, paranormal, urban fantasy, romance, YA novels when we were teenagers coming out all at once. I think we're seeing the same thing happening with romantasy. Now, here's where I'm going to expand upon that. I think that's happening because those of us who are reading those romantic YA paranormal fantasy novels, we're all grown up now and we still like that kind of stuff. So, following that line of thought, it makes sense why we're seeing this romantasy boom. Now, do I think it's a bad thing? Not necessarily. I think that trying to fit books into genres is complicated in general. I'm also not a professional, so maybe it's not as complicated as my little pea brain's trying to make it seem. But honestly, I fully believe that anything that gets you reading is probably a good thing. And I know that some people have very strong opinions that romantasy is trash and ruining literature. You can fuck off with those opinions, quite frankly. If you're reading something that you enjoy for enjoyment, good on you. Now, one thing that I don't read is graphic novels. I personally, they don't capture my attention well enough. But I know plenty of people who do love them. Get out there, read, babe. That's awesome. I will keep reading my romantasy books. And I've even seen the conversation being that romantasy is just porn for women. Go read some more romantasy books. Like, seriously, F off with that too, because there is a spectrum of spiciness in romantasy or any books really. You can get a goddamn thriller with spice. Ugh, that's just a thing that bothers me. If you're getting out there and reading for enjoyment, go read. Don't make any or don't let anyone make you feel less than because you like reading romantasy or even straight up erotica smut. You do you, babe. Do you how you see fit, if you catch my drift. But the romantasy thing, I get that this is going to be the conversation for a while as it's a booming popular genre. But I fully believe just because a fantasy book has romance in it does not mean it should be a romantasy. And that actually would mean a lot of books that I've read that could be that are considered romantasies technically probably don't need to be considered romantasies. They're a fantasy that happens to have romance in it, in my opinion. But people like to put labels on things and keep things in boxes. That seems to be human nature. And as long as romantasy is a big thing, we're going to get a lot of romantasy books pushed out. Do I think that's bad? No. No, for the record, I do not. I'm going to continue sitting over here reading my romantasy books, rotting my brain if you're one of the people who thinks that rots my brain. But honestly, Never the Roses taught me some new vocabulary. So you can learn brainy things from romantasy too, believe it or not. So that's my soapbox today. Get out there, read. If you're enjoying it, good. Romantasy is big right now. We see a lot of things being labeled romantasy that probably doesn't need to be. But like I said, those of us that were reading all of those fantasy, paranormal, romance, YA books 15 years ago, we're all grown up now, so makes sense.